One of the biggest mistakes people make with mower deck maintenance happens before they even touch the deck. They grab a scraper, reach for a socket wrench and start taking things apart before they even realize they have absolutely no idea what mower they're actually working on. Before you pick up a single tool, ask yourself these simple questions. What brand and model do I own? Does it have a stamped deck or a fabricated deck? And what size deck am I working with? Those answers will determine how you should clean the machine. Because despite looking similar from the outside, mower decks are engineered very differently. Let's start with the deck itself. There are two main types of mower decks you'll come across: stamped and fabricated. A stamped deck begins life as a single sheet of steel that's formed under enormous industrial presses and dies. Think of it as a giant hydraulic press, pulling a flat sheet of steel into becoming a mower deck. The result is a lighter deck with smooth, rounded contours that do more than just look nice. Those curves improve airflow beneath the blades, helping lift the grass upright before it's cut and throwing clippings out more efficiently. That's one of the reasons stamped decks are so common on residential mowers, where cutting quality and versatility are often more important than brute strength. A fabricated deck takes the opposite approach. Instead of being pressed from one sheet of steel, it's built from thick steel plates that are cut, welded, and reinforced into a rigid structure. If stamped decks are pressed into shape, fabricated decks are assembled like tanks. They're heavier, considerably stiffer, and designed to survive the kind of punishment commercial landscapers simply call another Tuesday. Do note, however, that neither is better. They are just built for different jobs. Fabricated decks excel in commercial environments because their rigid, welded construction stands up to rough terrain, repeated impacts, and long working hours. Stamped decks, meanwhile, usually produce better airflow, making them excellent for residential lawns where a clean, even cut, and efficient grass discharge take priority. So don't fall into the internet trap of assuming heavier automatically means better. Sometimes it just means heavier. Once you've identified the type of deck, the next question is who built it. The mower market looks crowded, but it's surprisingly consolidated. A handful of parent companies manufacture many of the underlying deck designs that eventually wear different brand badges. So while the logo on the hood might change, the engineering underneath often doesn't. If you're shopping the residential market, you'll probably recognize names like John Deere, Toro, and Cub Cadet. John Deere is known for its high airflow edge-cutting system and axle deep decks found on models like the S120. Toro combines its popular Super Recycler walk-behind decks with rugged iron-forged fabricated decks on many of its zero turns, while Cub Cadet equips machines like the XT Enduro with robust welded Aeroforce decks. Move into the commercial world and you'll find manufacturers building for durability above everything else. Exmark's UltraCut fabricated decks are trusted by professional landscapers. Skaggs Velocity Plus and Hero decks are famous for combining exceptional airflow with heavy-duty construction, while Ferris, Grevely, Ariens, and Lastec all engineer decks designed to withstand rough terrain, long hours, and relentless daily use. Battery-powered mowers solve the problem differently again. Since every extra kilogram affects runtime, brands like Ego Power Plus, Greenworks, and Ryobi focus on lightweight, composite, or stamped steel decks that maximize efficiency without sacrificing cutting performance. The last thing you need to identify is your deck size, and this catches more people out than you'd think. Most people assume a mower advertised with a 42-inch deck is actually 42 inches wide. But that measurement refers to the cutting width of the blades, not the outside width of the metal shell. In reality, a 42-inch deck often measures closer to 48 to 50 inches across, because the shell also has to house the spindle assemblies and discharge chute. The easiest way to check is by looking at the product identification tag attached to the deck shell. Many manufacturers include the cutting width in the model number. So a model ending in 48 often means you're looking at a 48-inch deck. If the tag has disappeared into the same mysterious place as every missing 10mm socket, you can measure it yourself. Park the mower on level ground, disconnect the spark plug wire for safety, rotate the outermost blades until they point straight from left to right. Then measure from the tip of the left blade to the tip of the right blade. That tip-to-tip distance is your true cutting width. It might seem like a minor detail, but deck size determines how easy the underside is to access and, in many cases, the safest way to clean it. Once you know exactly what you're working with, we can finally get into the mistakes that quietly destroy mower decks every year. Now that you know what you're working with, let's talk about the first mistake that destroys more perfectly good mowers than most people realize. You finish mowing, flip the mower over to scrape away the thick mat of grass stuck underneath the deck, and 5 minutes later, the engine refuses to cooperate. It starts belching white smoke. The air filter is soaked in oil, the spark plug fouls, and suddenly, what was supposed to be routine maintenance turns into an afternoon of troubleshooting. The frustrating part is that the grass isn't the problem. Gravity is. If you own a gas-powered push mower, the direction you tilt it matters far more than most people think. Inside the engine sits a crankcase filled with lubricating oil, along with a crankcase breather that allows pressure created by normal combustion blow by to escape safely. Under normal operating conditions, that breather only carries crankcase vapors back into the intake. Turn the mower the wrong way, however, and it becomes the perfect pathway for liquid engine oil. Tilt the mower with the air filter or carburetor facing the ground, and gravity immediately starts pulling oil through the breather passage. Within seconds, that oil can saturate the air filter, flood the carburetor throat, foul the spark plug, and, in more severe cases, even seep into the combustion chamber. The oil-soaked air filter restricts airflow. The carburetor can no longer maintain the correct air-fuel mixture. Combustion becomes unstable, and before long the engine begins coughing, sputtering, and producing enough white smoke to rival Snoop Dogg. In extreme cases, the situation becomes even more serious. If enough oil enters the cylinder, the piston may try to compress liquid instead of an air-fuel mixture. Since liquids are virtually incompressible, the engine can experience hydrolock, where the starter rope suddenly feels solid because the piston physically cannot complete its compression stroke. Although most homeowners catch the problem before permanent damage occurs, repeatedly forcing the starter rope can place unnecessary stress on internal components. Fortunately, the fix couldn't be simpler. Always tilt a petrol push mower with the air filter and carburetor facing upward, or better still, tip it back toward the handles if your manufacturer recommends that method. Every engine layout is slightly different, so it's always worth checking the owner's manual before lifting the machine. And if your mower is battery-powered, don't assume you're in the clear. The next mistake proves that water can be just as destructive as oil, especially when it finds its way into places it was never meant to be. For a lot of homeowners, the cleaning routine goes something like this. Scrape off the big clumps of grass, grab the pressure washer, blast every inch of the mower until it looks factory fresh, then park it back in the garage while it's still dripping wet. It certainly looks clean, but unfortunately, your mower deck doesn't care how clean it looks. One of the biggest misconceptions is that if a pressure washer can strip dirt off concrete, it must be the best way to clean a lawnmower. In reality, high-pressure water can be far more destructive than the grass you're trying to remove. The biggest victims are the spindle bearings. Every mower blade spins on a spindle assembly containing precision bearings packed with grease and protected by rubber or metal seals. The seals are designed to keep out rain, splashes, and ordinary washing, not a concentrated jet of water striking them at well over 1,000 psi. If you aim the jet directly at the spindle housing, and the water can be driven past the bearing seals, washing out the lubricating grease that separates the rolling elements from the bearing races. Engineers call this water intrusion, and once it happens, the bearing begins operating with inadequate lubrication. Moisture takes the place of grease, corrosion starts forming on the polished steel surfaces, and every revolution slowly grinds the bearing closer to failure. At first, you probably won't notice anything unusual. Then, the deck develops a faint rumbling noise, then a little vibration follows. Eventually, the blades begin wobbling. The cut becomes uneven, and replacing a perfectly good bearing suddenly becomes an expensive weekend project, all because it was cleaned a little too enthusiastically. Then comes mistake number 2 within the same mistake: putting the mower away wet. Freshly cut grass isn't just messy, it's surprisingly corrosive. The sap released from wet clippings contains natural acids that cling to the underside of the deck. If you leave that damp mixture trapped against the steel, you create the perfect environment for oxidation to begin. So instead of drying out, the trapped moisture sits against the metal for days, quietly attacking the paint, exposing bare steel, and eventually rusting the deck from the inside out. Fabricated decks are particularly vulnerable because their welded seams and square internal corners give wet debris far more places to hide. Thankfully, preventing all of this is simple. Start by scraping away heavy grass deposits with a plastic scraper or putty knife. If the deck needs rinsing, use a garden hose, not a high-pressure nozzle, and avoid directing water at the spindle assemblies. Once you're finished, run the mower for a minute or two. The spinning blades generate enough airflow to throw off most of the remaining water, helping dry the deck and reducing the amount of moisture left around the bearings and steel shell. Because sometimes the fastest way to destroy a mower deck isn't by hitting a hidden rock. It's by trying to make it look spotless. By now, you've probably realized there's no such thing as a universal cleaning method. The safest way to clean a mower depends entirely on the machine sitting in your garage, which is why the first questions you should always ask are: what brand and model do I have? Is it a gas push mower, a battery-powered mower, or a riding tractor? Those questions matter because mower designs vary so much that cleaning one type the wrong way can instantly damage components that another machine doesn't even have. Let's start with gas-powered push mowers. These are usually the easiest to clean because you can tilt them to access the underside of the deck, but only if you do it correctly. As we covered earlier, the mower should always be tipped back with the air filter and carburetor facing upward. Tip it the opposite way, and engine oil can migrate through the crankcase breather into the intake, soaking the air filter, fouling the spark plug, and, in severe cases, causing hydrolock. Battery-powered mowers are a completely different story. They don't have engine oil to flood the intake, but they do have electric drive motors, battery terminals, wiring harnesses, and electronic control modules that aren't designed to be blasted with water. That's why manufacturers generally recommend cleaning them with a stiff brush, plastic scraper, or compressed air instead of a hose. This is where your brand and model become important. Some Toro and Cub Cadet riding mowers are equipped with built-in deck wash ports, allowing you to connect a standard garden hose and rinse the underside while the blades spin. Other machines don't have that feature at all and are designed to be cleaned from service ramps or by removing the deck completely. The same applies to the spindle assemblies. Commercial machines from manufacturers like Skag and some John Deere models often use heavy-duty, greasable spindles that can be serviced after cleaning. Many residential mowers, however, rely on sealed-for-life bearings because they can force high-pressure water past those seals, and the grease is gone for good, leaving moisture to do the rest. That's why reading the owner's manual isn't just legal fine print. It's one of the cheapest repair bills you'll ever avoid. Two mowers may look almost identical sitting side by side, but one might be designed to use a washport, while the other expects you to clean it almost entirely by hand. Understanding those differences means you're working with the engineer who designed the machine, instead of accidentally undoing their work. If you found at least one mistake you've been making, hit subscribe, because the next expensive tool you save might be sitting in your garage right now.